Thank you for joining. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, we encourage you to watch more of the videos. And what we want is for you to learn scriptures, learn the Father's word, and have your spirit be saved in the end. That's our goal. Anyway, what we normally have as Cyber Church of Christ is we study topics normally. And also, if you want to contact us, any Bible question, we're ready to answer or find the answer for you, because that's what we do. And that's actually what we're commanded to do, is to be ready to give an answer. So since we like to do topics, you're going to see if you go through the whole YouTube channel there, we have over 100 different topics that we have a lesson on. And all these have topic inside topics. And the advantage of having the YouTube is you can pause it, rewind it, see what was said, watch it later, that type of thing. So I do like the format. Now, today's topic is called the house. And we're going to look at this house. We're going to compare it to physical house, but mainly we're talking about a spiritual house here. Our topic today is exactly what is this house you're talking about, since all of us know what a house is. We're going to start off with this. It's our Father's house, and it's located in heaven. So, if you ask some realtor person, they'll go location, location, location. Well, guess what? Father's house, location in heaven. Huh. Okay, well, now we're going to go about proving that. All right. Let's look at Jesus' teaching here. John 14:2, and it tells us a little bit about the house. In my Father's house are many mansions. And notice there's a colon there. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. All right, so let's look at that a minute. That's pretty interesting. We'll come here to the colon. In my Father's house. Okay, well, I thought that was Jesus's house. Well, not according to this. And how can you have a mansion inside a house? Because the house is where God lives, and we're going to build something for your spirit. And you know what? That's Jesus's job. He says, hey, I'm going to prepare a place for you. Oh, where? In my Father's house. That's how I started off the name. My Father's house, many mansions. So do you want to put things in a physical, what we call carnal thinking, is where do you live? You live in a small lean-to, a 2x4 house type thing? No, I live in a mansion. Well, that's how he's trying to describe it. Whatever you can come up with, it's going to be better than that. So here's where your habitat is going to be where? Well, my habitat's going to be a mansion in our Father's house. Why? Because my high priest prepared a place for me. Where'd you get that? John 14:2. I just read it. Okay. Let's continue on here. We got 2 Corinthians 5:1. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, an house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So there you go. That supports the what Jesus was teaching. That if our earthly house, in other words, what is your earthly house? That's where I'm living now. Well, or if you want to look at that, you want to look at it like your human body is housing your spirit. You might want to look at that, especially if you're looking at this lesson today, looking at spiritually as opposed to carnally, then go, my earthly house, that's where my spirit's in my body here. Yeah, what happens if that goes away? Well, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands. It's eternal and it's in the heavens. Okay, well, that's good. So we've established that our Father's house is located in heaven. And it's another deal. You know, Jesus is the builder, the one that built the universe and the creation. But now he's saying, hey, you're going to be building in the hereafter. Oh, okay. For what? Habitat for spirit. Isn't that what he has now is a habitat? Now let's look at this next section here. The house here on planet Earth is actually the church. Huh. The house spiritually is the church. How'd you get that? Well, we're going to look at a couple of scriptures. Ephesians 2:19 and 20. Now, therefore, ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God. Okay, I want to see who are the inhabitants of the household of God. Well, you used to be a stranger and a foreigner. You weren't habitating in the household of God, but now that you're a fellow citizen with the saints. Okay, so you're telling me saints are the ones living in the household of God. That's right. And how do I become a saint? Why don't you get with us on the Cyber Church of Christ? And we'll show you exactly where that is. What saints and sinners. Those are the two groups of people. Okay, and this says, hey, you were outside, now you're inside. You're in a place called the household of God. And what about this household of God? Verse 20, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. So he goes, hey, here's how I even built your house. You started with the foundation. Yeah, every building actually starts with a foundation. And its strength is determined what? By the foundation it's sitting on. Remember, you can have the great storm come in and not wipe out that house because it's built on rock, one built on sand. Well, what about spiritually? Well, spiritually, someone that's in an opinionated doctrine deal, they're actually building their house on sand. And we're building ours on Christ is the rock. We're going to build our house on the rock. And then how are you going to build it? Jesus Christ being the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone, we're going to take all our measurements off of that. Huh. So the house is the church, and it was built upon the foundation of apostles and prophets. Okay, so I can study Bible and see how the church was built. Excuse me. Yes, that's correct. Okay, well, that's pretty interesting. Now let's look at our next topic here is Christ, our high priest, is the head of the house. Oh, do you like have head of household? Yeah. Yeah, so we've established that the house is the Father's house. And now we've decided that the house here is spiritual on planet Earth. That's where we live. We're in a place called the household of God. Why? Because we're saints. And this says here what? Christ, our high priest, is the head of the house. Okay, where does it say that? Well, let's look at Hebrews 3. We'll look at Hebrews 10 also. But let's look at these three verses here, Hebrews 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. For every house is builded by some man, but he that built all things is God. And you ought to look at one of our lessons about God being the deity. We have the where the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and how they agree in one and they are one. Okay, well, that's how our house was built. It was built by having the architect, our Father, the builder, Jesus, and the operator, the Holy Spirit. And that's what God is. Now, he that built all things is God. What do you mean all things? You just said that the house is built by some man. They're right here, built by some man. Oh, yeah, well, that's because you're looking at things physically. Here you have where your spirit was created by our Father, then put in this environment. And then he says, hey, you know, this environment, I built all things. Built all things is God. And then I'm going to give you an example, verse 5. And Moses verily was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after, mainly that the Father was going to send the Messiah, that he made the Jewish doctrine as part of what? An interim, so that you had a belief, you could at least follow the doctrine and belief before the Messiah got here. Once the Messiah got here, he confirmed all things. And that's what we believe in. We believe in Jesus established the doctrine in the church, and then the church began on the day of Pentecost. All right, so Moses was faithful in all his house. Basically, if you're in a different doctrine, then you're not welcome in the house. Okay, does it sound cruel? Well, it sounds cruel, but it's a commandment we have. All right, Hebrews 3:6. But Christ as a son over his own house, whose house are we, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope firm unto the end. Okay, well, this is a lot in here. Let's look at this. Christ as a son over his own house. But you told me up here that this is the Father's house. You said my Father's house up here. Yeah, it's his Father's house, but it says, hey, you know what? I put the son over his own house. So you gave the house to the son. Yeah, gave everything to the son. Well, he's in charge of everything. Who? To Christ. We're in charge. Now he's in charge of the house. And now not only that, he's saying, hey, it's your house. So it's our Father's house who then gave, and then who is the head of household? Well, it's actually Lord, but that's a whole different topic. We do have a study there on Lord versus Lord, which is all caps versus mixed case. You ought to look at that one too. You'll learn something there. Now this says Christ is son over his own house, whose house are we? So you're saying, hey, we're in that house. Okay, well, good. So once I got baptized in the Church of Christ. So then the preacher told me I was saved. And so anyway, I knew when I die, I'm going to heaven. Okay, well, I have highlighted here. Are you forgetting this part? There's a big if in here. Aren't you? Did you say you're in the house of the Father? Yeah, and the head of the house is Jesus. The Christ, your high priest. That's correct. Okay, well, that's the house we are in. That's correct. Okay, well, let me put an if with that. You got to hold fast the confidence. What is this hold fast? Well, like one of our students, she would explain it that, oh, by the way, I'm just hanging on by my fingertips. I could fall off a cliff. I'm holding on for dear life. The only thing holding me up is my fingertips. And boy, do I want to hold on. Well, I tell you, you should be holding on to the doctrine and your spirit and you being saved in the end. You got to hold on. There's the wiles of the world, Satan and all his fellows are trying to pull you out of the house. Hey, you need to come out here. Look at all the temptations out here. You come out of the house, you can see them all. And then, well, I got a commandment in Hebrews 3:6 that says, no, I'm supposed to hold fast in this house. Then I'm supposed to get confidence that I'm in the right house and I'm staying in there. And you know what I'm going to do about that? I'm going to rejoice. And it's called a hope. And then I'm going to affirm. You're going to keep that hold for how long? Until the end. Well, I thought you said you were already saved. Well, no, you're not already saved, because this says here, you got a big if. It says you got to hold on to it until the end. Yeah, when is it you're not supposed to be a Christian? Oh, you're always supposed to be a Christian, right? All the way to the last breath. Okay, so you're supposed to have this hope that lies within you. That's a whole nother topic. It was actually my mother's favorite topic, was the hope. It's confidence in the hope firm until the end. Now look at this, Hebrews 10:21. and having a high priest over the house of God. So you had over right here in that, and you had over up here, Hebrews 3, 7 chapters later. You know about he's over that. All right, so it was the Father's house. And then he put Jesus in charge. And he says, you need to live in this house. For how long? You need to for the end. You know, hold on for dear life. Didn't he say this whole fast thing? Yeah. Well, look, you got a high priest. You got to head a household here. So that's what we came up with. Christ, our high priest, is the head of the house. Where did you get that? Right here in Hebrews. And it says here, he's the high priest over the house of God. So that was an easy one to prove. Okay. Now let's go on down here. Us that live in the house, what do? Okay. So let's look at that. Residents of the house, which are referred to, there's more names than this, but I've just picked out a few. They're referred to as brethren. So when you see a commandment says, brethren do this, brethren do that, talking to residents of the house. Saints, I mentioned that earlier about being saint versus sinner. Saints are the ones that are residing there. We already had that up in a previous verse. Heirs, when I'm going to inherit something. Well, yeah, you need to study that too. You're going to be inheriting the kingdom. You'll be an heir. Actually, you get adopted in, and you'll be as Jesus. Well, I'm not as good as Jesus. Yeah, join the club, but you get adopted in, and you will be like him. So that's a whole nother topic, and you ought to study that topic, heirs. That's really interesting, and it's really spiritually uplifting. But anyway, you know what these residents have? Commandments. Well, you're going to live in this house, and you're going to have house rules. Hey, what's the way it was when I was a teenager in my parents' house? You know, because why? Because the person running the house gave the rules. Well, that's what we got here. Father's house. It's got Jesus in charge. Do you want to live here? Yes. Here's your commandments. Here's the house rules. Oh, well, let's look at this Galatians 6:10. As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. Okay, well, so you're calling this house a household of faith. That's right. And Jesus is faithful. That's correct. And then we are to have faith. Yep. Where? In this house. You should be in the house of God, and you should have faith is what's keeping you there. Isn't that right? Well, yeah, because why? Because I have this hope that I'm after. So we're called the household of faith. Well, that's interesting. So what's the name of this house that God built? It's called the household of faith. You want to live there? Okay, well, it looks like you're going to need faith to live there. Oh, and you know, if you do live in here, you need to do good unto all men. I know, but there's evil men out there, and people said something bad about me. Okay, so what are you going to tell them? Well, I'm not telling them anything. I'm telling you to do good. Yeah, but the guy insulted me. So told you you're supposed to do good. Now, if they're in the household of faith, they're brethren, then you need to be especially good. Oh, okay. Yeah, I got that. Especially good if they're in the household of faith. Okay, well, it's good to know. Let's look at this next verse. 1 Timothy 3:15. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. Well, he said everything right there in one verse. Huh. Okay, so you're supposed to know, for one thing, you're supposed to know. How are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to study scripture to get knowledge. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That's in Hosea 4:6. Oh, so, you know, we're going to put, You know what we're going to have in almost every sermon? We're going to have knowledge and faith. Knowledge and faith. They keep showing up. Now, you know how you ought how to behave yourself in the house of God? Oh, but I've seen on TV these people, they're in church dilly and they're jumping up and down and screaming and raising their hands and stuff. Yeah, and what are they learning? What scripture? Well, they're not learning, but they're in, they're in the spirit. They really feel good. Okay. Is that how you're supposed to behave in the house of God? Are you supposed to be silent and learn? And the preacher has commandments, and the people in the church had commandments. And then we have those in the house having assembly worship. That's what we're doing today. We're in our assembly worship on Sunday. Why? Because it's the first day of the week. And why? Because it's a commandment for those in the house. We're going to meet and break bread, which means we're going to have communion, which we already did. But we already had prayers for the communion. Why? Because we're obeying these commandments. Now it says here, look at the pillar and ground. What is that? I don't know. I'll ask some builder, some engineer person or something. Does it matter what kind of ground you're building this thing on? Oh, yeah. Does it matter what kind of strength the building has? Well, yeah, we got to have pillars. You ever heard of beam and pillars? Yeah. Here's what the truth is standing on is what? The truth? Yeah. Where is he standing? Here in the house of God. Hey, that's where I have the truth residing right now. The truth that resides in this house. That's what's holding everything up. What's holding the truth up, this pillar and ground, is the church. That says it's the church. So it's my church. No, it's the church of the living God. And then someone's always bringing up this verse. He's the God of the living. He's the God of the living, not God of the dead. He's the God of the living. Well, here's another spot where it says that. Church of the living God. And now he's saying, hey, well, you just gave the church a big commandment here. If we're going to be holding up the truth, yeah, you mean being a foundation of truth that can stand no matter what kind of storm hits it? Yeah. Yeah, he's got pillared in. He's in there. What is it? The truth. We have the pillar and ground of the truth. He says, hey, that's the church. So that's where this house is. The house is the church. It's spiritual. It's referred to us as brethren and then the called. So if you say, hey, how do I become this brethren, saints, heirs thing? Well, you get called. So if you, and there's a pamphlet you can look at too about calling on the name of the Lord. You should look that up because that's how you actually get entrance into the house, is that you're called. Okay. So you would be called into the house. Hey, come on in here. Yeah. So you get called by who? Who's ever running the house? Oh, well, the head of the house was Jesus. Already saw that over the house of God. That's right. So we have God calling people in to the house. That's right. And him that hath an ear, well, they heard the calling and they came into the house. And that's what we are. That's certainly what I am. That's what I want. I want to stay in that house. Why? Because I like how it's managed. It's got my high priest, the head of the house. Let's look at this 1 Peter 2:5. Ye also, who's this ye? This ye is this brethren, saints, and heirs and called people. Oh, yeah. They're the ones that are the ye here. So if you're studying with me and I go, hey, there's your pronoun, who are the nouns? And then you would say, well, it's actually those living in the house of God. And I'd say, correct. And they go by what? Oh, brethren, saints, heirs, the called. But anyway, he's referring to us in the church. We're members of the church. Yeah. Ye also, as lively stones, are built up the spiritual house. Oh, well, what is that? Some kind of house within a house? Well, where is your spirit located? It's located in your physical body. Okay. Now, that's where it resident at the time, but that's not its permanent house. Its permanent house, the spirit is owned by our Father, returns to him. And then he houses you wherever the truth says he houses you at. So where do I want to be housed? In heaven. I want to go to heaven up here. That's the spot where I want to go. He goes, okay, well, you need to build up your own house with bricks of truth. Okay. And when you do build up the spiritual house, is what we're wanting here. I mean, you got a nice house that you live in. What does your spiritual house look like? The shambles? Well, no, I don't even have one. Okay, well, that's going to tell me as a preacher, let's start with the foundation. We already had that up earlier in today's sermon. Hey, you need a foundation. Okay, why? Because you're going to build something. You're going to build up on this foundation. What is it you're building? I'm building a holy priesthood. Oh, so holy priesthood is in a commandment of these saints. That's right. What's it for? Well, it's to offer up spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable. Okay, well, how do I find out what spiritual sacrifice is? Why don't you study with us? We'll show you those scriptures. So you're talking about people in this house have spiritual sacrifices. That's correct. What spiritual fact? Well, the one we're going to show you, they're ones that are acceptable. I know people that make spiritual sacrifices. They're not acceptable to God based on what? Based on the Bible. You're supposed to know. And there's a thing called know how. Okay? So I want to do things, have a spiritual sacrifice acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. Hey, here's where you have them separated. That's our Father, because God is what? A pronoun, yeah. And then Jesus Christ is the human being that fulfilled the scriptures, that fulfilled all prophecy, and now is where? Well, on the right hand of our Father, but he's the head of the house. Huh? Yeah, we had that up here. He's over the house of God. So, hey, you want to get it? Why don't you get a hold of us as the Cyber Church of Christ? Say, hey, I want to get in this house. Because we'd love to show you that. We don't want to be the only residents. Okay, now let's look at this. Judgment begins with the house of God. What is it? What do you mean it begins? Let's look at this 1 Peter 4:17. For the time has come that judgment must begin at the house of God. Oh, got a colon there? Yeah. For the time judgment begins at the house of God. Okay, where'd you come up with that? Well, we're going to be judging all spirits in the end, and we're going to begin with the house of God. Well, you're going to open some book and it has names in it? Yeah, that's another topic to study. Oh, you ought to study this Judgment Day and what all happens on Judgment Day. But we're going to begin with the house of God. Well, I didn't know that. Well, yeah, it's in here. It says here, judgment must begin at the house of God. And since it begins with the house of God, it first began at us. What shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? So let's look at this whole verse. Time has come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it first began at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? So you mean people that aren't living in the house. What do you want me to tell you in another example? The ark. He says, hey, I'm going to build you a house to save souls. And I'm going to have the residents in there have commandments. And then those people that are resident of the house, they will be saved from the destruction. Oh, so the ark is, yeah, we even have comparisons of the ark and the house and the church. Oh, so you're going to begin. So we have the safe haven. Yeah, you're in the house of God and you're going to avoid the destruction. All right. So what happens to those of them that obey not the gospel of God? Rhetorical question. So that's what we can tell you. Hey, what happens to me if I never enter this house? Well, then we can tell you that you'll be just like those in the flood. You'll want to, as soon as you see the fact that you're being judged and the judge is in front of you and there's no longer faith required, but you're dealing with fact, what are you going to say? Oh, yeah, let me in the house. Well, no, the front door's been shut now. Is that what happened with the ark? Yeah, we shut the door. And now there's a lot of people scrambling to get in. They can't get in. What's going to happen at the judgment day? And say, hey, yeah, now all that was true that the people of Cyber Church of Christ were teaching, and all that was true. Now, I'm ready to get in the house of God now. Well, it's too late now. The floods already came. The door's locked. So those that obey not will end up being not saved in the end, living in the lake of fire. So let's summarize this whole thing here. The house front door is open. Which means so right now you could actually be living outside the house and be able to come in. Yeah, right through the front door. It's wide open. Well, who could go in the ark? As long as the door was open, anybody could go in the ark. That's what we have as the church. Can I get in the church? Yeah, front door is open. The head of the house is inviting you in. Really? Yeah, you're being called, aren't you? Called to come into the house. You're being invited in. By who? By the word. We have the living word and the written word. We can show you that. Called calling on the name of the Lord. That's what's happened when you're entering the house. The Lord has called you in, and you say, I want to come in. You invited me in, right? That's right. So we're called. Yeah, we're the called. The head of the house is inviting you in, and he's providing residents a spiritual path to peace. Well, how can God be here? Because there's people that, there's been some mass shootings and children die, a bunch of evil in the planet. Yeah. The Father says, sufficient to the days, the evil thereof. I got the whole world full of evil. Are you making a point that since God exists, there's no evil? That's heaven. I see that all the time. I'll see that on Facebook. People getting mixed up between heaven and earth. Heaven has no sin at all. Earth's full of sin. Oh, that's why I'm being tested. Hey, there's going to be sin all about you. You can probably sin there. Here's you. You know what you need? You need a spiritual path to peace. Where do I get that? In this house. You're out there where turmoil is, aren't you? You're outside the house. Well, you're being invited in, and it's a path to peace. What is this path? Well, it's actually kind of narrow. It's straight and narrow. And you would stay on this house, and you would experience what? Spiritual peace. Now, there's plenty of room available. Okay, so you're telling me the front door is open. There's a house. I got spiritual path to peace in there, and there's plenty of room. Yeah. Okay, then what's holding you up? Oh, you said you don't want to be in the house. Okay, so you must believe. Well, yeah, you got to hear about the house. Then you got to believe it's there. Then you got to repent, saying, "Hey, I'm not in the house." Oh, well, what kind of confession are you going to make? Well, confess that Jesus Christ, Son of God. Okay, so you're confessing who the head of household is. Yeah. And so to enter, you're going to do what? Get baptized. I'm going to be calling on the name of the Lord. And that does what? That's going to enter the house. Okay. So where's the caveat? The caveat's got to be breathing. You only have the ability to enter the house while you're a human being breathing here on planet Earth. That's correct. And you can prove that. Yes, we can prove that. So if you're watching this, you're alive and breathing, go, hey, I don't think I'm in the house. But if you don't think you are, you're not. Only I'm in the house. I sure would like to get in the house, and I'm still breathing. I'm still a human being here on planet Earth. My spirit hasn't been judged yet. Okay. Well, come on in here to the house of God. That's where Cyber Church of Christ is. We're in the house of God. You can come join us. What would you be doing? Spiritually living here. So you're being invited in. Do you want this peace deal in this turmoil, world of turmoil? That's where it's at. It's in the house. Anyway, I hope that finishes our topic today. But I'm hoping that you learn something from it and that you want to get in the house. Want to realize you're not in the house and get in the house. Contact us. We got this Cyber Church of Christ deal at Gmail, and you can just email us anything, any question, anytime, and we're going to answer it. So we're the Cyber Church of Christ. We're very happy that you watched today's video and hope that you watch more. Anyhow, hope you have a great day. Come on and get in the house with us. Talk to you later. Hold on just a second.